Can you get her? Can you get my collar?
Cute.
My.
You need to give her a name and date of birth.
Yes. No, I didn't drive the car.
What's wrong here?
No.
Would he have left his phone? Yeah.
Sorry?
Would he normally left his phone here? Does he take it with him often anywhere?
It kind of so depends on what we tell him. If they were to say, like, oh, yeah, you can take your phone.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take it.
Does he have service?
He does.
Is that his phone? Which one?
Yeah, this one's his phone.
Who's that?
His mom.
Let me see. Let's do it over this way.
It might be in that big pocket.
If she's looking for ID, just put that in there, right?
It might be, I'm just waiting, okay, because it might be the same phone.
Hold on a second, y'all.
Oh, okay, okay. Because I was like, I mean, it's
I'm trying to make it to where the
Right, so it's STCIA. Stalk. TCIA.
that's terrible.
Stalk. And STAUCH. And 8483.
Is it gonna be out of Colorado, like your driver's license, or is it another state?
Another state.
What state is that?
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yeah.
That's the accent, huh?
Yeah, that's the accent.
Okay.
8483.
Yeah, like August 4th, 1983.
And then a middle initial or name for out of states.
Is the other dog? Yeah, no, it says no.
What's your middle name?
I mean, no, it is that.
Middle name?
It's my maiden name.
It's blurry.
Diane.
I just cannot get this looking right.
When I said one time someone for 11, I remember you called. Were you the called or was it your husband?
No, I called 911 and then they said call like a non-line or something. And called a bunch of lines and then it'll like a couple like the Nana called another line. So.
Okay. Get her telephone number too, though, because they might not have a good contact if there's several people that called.
All right, so 843 655 7460.
Do you have a picture of him on your phone?
No.
Can you?
The ones we all have are like mostly him and his sister together. And can you crop that out or is it?
Yeah, if you want to too. I mean, yeah, on your phone, you can send it.
So this is the one that everyone has been sending. Is this one? Do you want me to send it to?
Yeah, his phone. And then go ahead and get that information for the information I sent you on there after you get the picture.
All right, what?
Stand by.
Listen.
Sure. I just got a new phone number, so I don't know what it is. If you wanna, while I do this, try and find the driver's license, or they're not finding you.
It's LE. If you're running me in, like instead of TCIA, it's LE TCIA.
Okay.
And Letitia.
One I'm sitting on. You try Lincoln Edward Tom, Edward, Charles, either Adam for the first name.
Okay, I'm gonna move this over here. Oh, shoot. Maybe the lighting will be better.
We're talking about?
Just that they're looking.
Okay. Nothing. I let it lock, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm sending you that picture right away.
huh.
Sure, it all over. I have a line for you. 719-663.
719.
So it's going to be 101-27-5370 South Carolina. So y'all contacted all the friends that y'all know about at this point. Parents, any of them saying anything that you know about that they said they haven't seen him today as well? Nothing like that.
The lighting is terrible.
Nothing other than him taking his switch, his game thing. Nothing else missing. He didn't ride his bike. You just told her, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing other than that. Then no suspicious circumstances. And then other than some weird text that I guess he was sending that about assault. Okay. He's got some other information, just some medical stuff that we would like to have. And he's already listed as well. So if he's riding around with a brother car,
Sorry, guys.
he gets contacted. What he did, obviously. What's your name? He comes up that he's running with. They'll give you a call. Yeah. You want to get that stuff and then.
It was in here with the sleep. That stuff is down there, sir. Can I show him about the smoke stuff? I just didn't want him to step on the cutter, the box thing. I think I seen him right down there. Okay, if you weren't in here, you weren't in here again, right? I thought I didn't know if I had that box for him. Because I told him about dropped his handle last night.
Okay.
And I thought I must have picked it up. I was just making sure I didn't want you to be like, oh, there's a box. But yeah, I had to cut this. And that's what I wasn't even going to tell Dad. And I was going to figure out a way to put this in there from the situation. But
At least you got a carpet. Yeah.
right, we just took it and like covered up with the carpet and stuff like that. But it's just not even any friends from up there. There is let me look on this thing. He did have this one like boat thing.
That's where you're supposed to be at down the road. They checked out on me. They went over there and talked to him, and they're like, no, we hadn't seen him at all.
He did have this like
And you talked to parents, right? You didn't talk to.
Yeah, Connor's mom came over, who is a friend he goes hangs out with all the time. So they come over. The people here, the friends, they were just the ones that were the door with the bike. They came over. A bunch of people came over. Yeah, so
Look better close
she did have
or
like a
farther
little book
back.
that had names on it, but I don't know. I don't see it like anywhere specifically.
Going up close.
Like his
Probably
mom,
right there.
He's not like a. I teach fifth grade, and like you got your like really mature kind of boys, but then what the way he forgets to like bring this or bring that or bring this or bring that. No, we actually lay out all the clothes all the time, like for like every day at school we lay out clothes, we do whatever.
His jacket on.
He had on the jackets, like I'm very like fashion, so it just depends on jackets, like. You might have this black one with this, or there's a blue one with this.
So you got a jacket?
Yeah.
Okay.
Several jackets. So you see the kid has, like tons and tons of clothes, and he just,
Okay.
he has all that stuff. So. And he feels like none of this, like these are his favorites. All of these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, he's gonna grab some more questions and,
Okay.
how long have you guys lived here?
We like a year and something now. Yeah.
Can you talk to all of his friends' parents in the
I'm not the things. I don't have numbers. I don't say yes. I don't say no. My husband says yes for them. So he has all the numbers.
Some friends that you don't.
Right. Because I don't know the people like that. And a lot of the time that I was here, I had to get a job on the East Coast. So I had to fly back and forth a lot. So I didn't really meet a lot of people, like my husband did. And he's like, always want to be the one to talk to everybody about it instead of.
How about your husband's been talking to these people?
Yeah, he's been on the phone with a bunch of them. He's in Oklahoma, Fort Steele right now.
So is there anybody he hasn't been able to get a hold of?
He said he's talked to everyone that he knows of. The only concern we had is that he was talking about the friend with the older sibling, and we don't know who that one is. That's the one we don't know.
You guys have a name for that?
Because we don't know who that person is. We've never heard him say like specific name. My husband said when he talked to him today that there was no like specific name for, but he didn't give him a name. He just told him that.
And he took his game console bill.
Yeah, they have a couple of different consoles.
One of them's gone.
Switch Lite, the 3DS, the 3DS. One of them's gone. It was in like a bluish black. Wait, no, that one might be in red. I don't remember. I just know in the video you can see that, or the picture that the lady had. You can see like he's got something right here, and it's like not far down.
Which pictures is?
So some lady online had noticed it, like messaged us and had noticed that was him or the description, and she was like, "Was that him?" And I was like, "Yes."
What was that picture taken?
No, I honestly have about 150 Facebook messages that I haven't answered people on because you guys should.
Was it local? I mean, was it in the Lawson Ranch?
Lawson Ranch. Someone put it on the Lawson Ranch page, and so a lot of people just kept sending messages, information. First, someone said they saw him get in a white SUV. Then someone said they called it on their camera. They were all supposed to be sending this to me, but as I was talking to all these people on Facebook, because my husband gave the neighbor permission to post it, you guys came and I kept having alerts with, and I wasn't gonna Huh? Okay. No. Yeah.
Okay. I know you probably gave some of this information to dispatch already, but can you give us a description of him from top to bottom? Hair color, eye color,
brown, let's see, brown,
I don't know.
like whitish color skin.
I guess it needs to somewhere in there.
Just keep this goes off heat.
The parents been there.
And then
Well, they said that
410.
there's a weird text that Dad got about something about bath salts, and hey, if I can get some bath salts, do we have any bath salts? And my friend will let me play Sonic or something in their house. Yeah, I got it. And then Mom goes through everything, finds this part of. Yes, sir. I'm not bad. Yes.
Yes.
No, we're still getting the runaway report right now.
Harley, did you get it? Who was it?
Okay, I appreciate it.
Oh, okay. I just didn't.
Right, I mean, there's not anything that's suspicious about it. I think that it just kind of went viral on social media, and so everybody's finding out about it now. He just didn't show home at 6, but he's also been in trouble, and had a game console that he left with, so he's probably at somebody's house right now playing games.
That's why being a husband absolutely can't think. You think that we calm down stress level before we.
Like a thick, heavy winter jacket, windbreaker.
No, like the ones I was showing you guys in there, kind of a little windbreaker type.
Okay, good to know. Anything to okay, perfect, yeah. update, so I'll be on all that.
They asked me about tattoos and how to read and all that.
Like, I'm gonna have to
Okay,
ask
perfect.
a lot of the same questions that dispatch asked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you hear anything from the school, let us know, please. Just not right now.
Yeah, we already talked to a bunch of people at the school.
Yeah, they said I had security, so they.
Game or something tonight. So that was like one of the things we were thinking if I guess they went to like the basketball game or something.
It said there was, it said there was parking right now, so. Yeah.
It was off the week.
Okay.
There's somebody in the neighborhood or something. You guys want to call it as an
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, because we don't have a little bit more information there, but.
a lot of the
Okay.
he does all that.
I also been over station, but.
Not restationed here, he's just at private career coach.
Okay.
So they go to a dentist. I think it's like Fountain Dentist, maybe.
Yeah, we'll get on it.
Base.
We'll give him a call.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Al, A-L, Stauch, S-T-A-U-C-H. 843 478 6784. Yes.
Are we back on 3?
I'm on 3.
And they call it code.
Give him a call, get some more information.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the medical, dental, like he'll know like all that stuff because he takes them all base.
Alright, well, we'll go give him a call in the car real quick and see if we can get any information that we already have. If not, we'll come back and we'll give you the case number for the runaway and everything. Okay? Alright. Thanks.
So down here now.
I didn't see him.
You have gas and
Oh my god. Fancy.
Prosecution, can I next witness, please?
You guys have a question, I'm still here.
Sergeant, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. You swear affirm the testimony about to give this man will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You're going to have to see the witness stand. Please watch your step. She stepped into the stand.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Will you please state your name for the record?
Yeah, it's Christopher Gannon, Ganstine.
And while it may be apparent, how are you employed?
I'm employed with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your role at the Sheriff's Office?
My current role is I'm a patrol supervisor.
Sergeant?
Yes.
And in January of 2020, what was your role then?
I held the rank of Detective Sergeant, and I was assigned to the Colorado Springs Metro Vice and Narcotics Unit.
And in terms of your role specifically as it relates to that case, this case here, what were you tasked with doing with the Metro VNI unit?
One of our many tasks that we do is we do covert surveillance, and we were asked to start a surveillance operation on the defendant.
And as part of that surveillance on January 30th of 2020, where was your team located?
We had started early in the morning at, I believe it was the 10,000 block of Intrepid Way, which was in the Lorson Ranch neighborhood.
And were you able to make visual contact with the person you know to be Letitia Stauk?
I was.
Okay. And do you see that same person here today in court?
I do.
Can you identify her by where she's seated in the courtroom?
She's sitting next to an attorney wearing a blue suit, and she's wearing a purplish top.
All right. Your Honor, may the record reflect that the sergeant has identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect. Go ahead.
Can you walk us through what you observed on January 30th with that surveillance?
Yeah, so we were told from the night before that the defendant and her daughter were more than likely staying at that address. When I got there, the vehicle that was in question that she was seen in the day before, it was a white Jetta, was in the driveway. And so I had actually, since I got there first, I had set up shortly down the street with a clear view of the door and the vehicle. And I can't recall the exact time. I know we were there for a little bit that they'd come out, but I observed the defendant and Harley, her daughter, walk out of the house and get in the vehicle. Harley got into the driver's seat and the defendant got into the rear right passenger seat.
And as at that point, after viewing the defendant get into the passenger seat, did the Metro VNI team continue to conduct surveillance?
Yeah, we started what we refer to as rolling surveillance. We're all in covert vehicles, and so we started from there, and we just were tasked with following her and seeing what she was doing.
And as you continue to follow her, any sort of observation that you made about movements or type of movements?
Yeah, it was weird because there was only two people in the car. She was sitting in the back seat, and for most of the time that they were driving, she would either be completely slouched down so you couldn't actually see her in the back seat, or her head would just be up far enough to where you could kind of see her looking out the window. But she wasn't sitting like a normal person would sit, and she wasn't sitting in the front seat either.
And based on your training experience and what you've done, especially with the Metro VNI unit, how would you describe that type of behavior?
That behavior is common when we're following fugitives or following people that are, I don't want to call it surveillance conscious. I guess the term would be people that feel that they may be subject to law enforcement surveillance and are trying to hide themselves from that.
Avoid detection?
Avoid detection would be a good term.
At that point, is there a particular area, and if you could explain why a particular area was chosen in town to make contact with the defendant?
We followed her for about an hour-ish, going to various places. Eventually, she ended up at a parking lot at the intersection of Woodman and Academy. It was the Marshall's clothing store. Harley had parked in the parking lot, and then they had walked inside the store. Shortly after they had walked inside the store, I was notified by Sheriff's Office Investigations that they had obtained a warrant for the vehicle that they were driving, and that they had also obtained an additional warrant for a cell phone that was either in the possession of Harley or her, that they had both been using. And they had asked that we basically come out from cover, from surveillance, and make contact and secure the vehicle, and then secure the phone.
Do you have a rough approximation about what time that would have been that you were given essentially the green light to move forward?
I believe it was the early afternoon.
And did you create a report in conjunction with your work on this case?
I did.
And would reviewing that report refresh your recollection as to the time?
It would.
You have permission to approach?
You may. $13:24, so 1:24 p.m.
Your recollection?
It does. Sorry.
So and not everybody thinks in military time, but what is 13:24?
That'd be 1:24 p.m.
Okay. At that time, can you explain for the jury what you did?
So I'd coordinated my team. I had put some detectives inside the Michaels to maintain surveillance on those two, and then I had created a multi-person team outside, and the plan was that when they had checked out, we would be notified outside that they had. Once they had walked outside, we were going to have two units that have emergency lights just pull up, and we were going to do what we refer to as like a soft contact, just, hey, to the police, we got to get your phone and we got to do this because we got a warrant. And that was the plan, that they'd come out and do that. Our main concern was obviously the phone and destruction of evidence, or being able to get back in the car and flee.
So, in relation to the type of approach you use, decided to use, then was that important?
I'm sorry, I couldn't overhear with cough.
In terms of the type of approach that you wanted to use, a soft approach, that was important for the purposes of evidence?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury what you were wearing, how you looked that day?
Yeah, so I was undercover, so I was wearing street clothes. However, we have what we refer to as raid vest or bus vest. So it's similar to this, except what I was wearing is all black. All of my stuff that I would normally have on a belt, kind of like what this is all on my vest, including my firearm. The main difference, it's black. The word sheriff is across the entire chest. It's bigger than what this is. And then I didn't have a cloth badge at that time. That one actually had my physical real metal badge on my thing. And then it was in January, so I would have been wearing jeans and a hoodie under it.
So dressed in all of those things that you're wearing on January 30th, what occurred when you went to approach the defendant?
So it didn't go as planned because Harley had stayed inside, and then the defendant had come out. Specifically, when the defendant came out, she was holding the keys to the car. And so that's a concern. We can't let her get into the vehicle. Where her vehicle was, I was parked directly next to her vehicle, in between her vehicle and the store. So I radioed to everybody that we would stick with Harley inside, and that I was going to get out and just contact the defendant myself and just let her know what was going on, that we had a warrant for the car and that I couldn't let her in and I need to get the keys. So I had gotten out of my car that time, and as she walked up to me, I'd approached her. Actually, I didn't really approach her. She'd gotten there about the same time, right in between the two cars.
While that approach is happening, can you describe the defendant's demeanor?
She was surprised. So she kind of froze, and I said, "My name is Sergeant Gannon with the Sheriff's Office. We have a search warrant for the vehicle. I can't let you into it. I'm going to need the keys." And basically, it was, like I said, it was a soft approach, just like I'm talking now. She didn't acknowledge me. She didn't say anything. Where she was, she had maneuvered kind of closer to her driver's door, and then just started slowly walking backwards.
Were there any observations that you noticed about her gaze or where she was looking, anything like that?
So the two biggest things I noticed is she was just stuttering, like one word, like key, warrant, like just repeating what I was saying. And then she kept walking further back, and I told her, I said, "Relax, you're not in trouble. I just need the keys to the car. I can't let you into it." She continued to walk back, and then I noticed she started to turn her head behind her, because when that was going on, so there's my vehicle, her vehicle, and I'm here, she's here, so she can't go past me, she can't go left or right. So all she can do is basically turn around, and so I noticed that she was periodically turning around as she continued to walk backwards.
As she walked backwards, what did she do after that?
She turned, ran in a full sprint away from me. She had the keys in her hand. I was like, okay. Got on the radio, and I was like, she's running. Like, I don't know what's going on. And I started running after her. As she was running away from me, she had taken the keys to the car and threw them across the parking lot. It took us a little bit of time to find them, but she had thrown them across the parking lot, and so she threw them one way and then kept running the other way from where she threw the keys.
Ultimately, after running after her, were you able to make contact?
Yes, to the two vehicles that had the lights that we were going to have come in, they rolled in. They got out. One drew his firearm and gave her commands, and she had stopped and got on the ground at that time. And then I didn't know what was going on, so I went up and handcuffed her at that time, detained her, until we could find out what was going on and what had happened. And then she was given to two other people that had taken her back to a car.
Okay, but to be clear, at that time, she was not being arrested, correct?
No.
While you were present on scene with other law enforcement members, where was Harley Hunt?
She was, when that happened, she was walking out of the Michaels pretty like within a minute of that happening and then me detaining the defendant.
Okay, and with specifically as it relates to the approval of the search warrant for a cellular telephone, was that able to be gathered that day?
Yes. Initially, Harley was reluctant to give the phone. And so one of the detectives, she had it in her hand. One of the detectives just yanked it right out of her hand so she couldn't manipulate or do anything with it.
Was there any interaction that you observed between the defendant and her daughter, Harley Hunt, while you were present on scene?
Yes. The defendant was fairly hysterical. She was screaming. She was yelling obscenities, things like that. Once she realized that we were also in contact with Harley, she started screaming at Harley, saying, "Don't say anything. Tell me what an attorney. Don't talk to him." Those type of statements. And we were trying to tell her we just need to get the phone.
And after obtaining the phone from Harley Hunt and securing Ms. Stauk, what did you do after that?
At that point, we had moved Harley because Harley started crying and she was fairly hysterical as well. But actually, before that, I talked to the defendant and I told her she needed to calm down. She's screaming. We're in a public parking lot. She's committing criminal acts and she doesn't need to get herself in trouble. So just to relax and calm down. And she did. Once I had that short conversation with her, she stopped yelling. And then we had moved Harley into the back of one of our patrol vehicles. We didn't close the door. We left the door open. And I just had a quick conversation with Harley to calm her down because she was crying and she was fairly hysterical.
Okay, and were you able to calm her down?
Yeah, I told her, hey, here's the deal. We needed to get the phone. I don't know what your mom just did, but we're fine now, and we're going to let you guys go. So. And
to be clear, up until that point, the defendant was not arrested. She was not. She didn't have any criminal summons or anything like that you provided to her, correct?
No, until we can secure the scene and find out exactly what the circumstances were behind the unusual reaction of me just trying to get car keys, given the scope of the investigation and its infancy, we didn't know if there was something more that we didn't know until we knew. So once we calmed everything down, got everyone calm, we released them because we accomplished what we needed to do, which was to execute the 2 warrants. And after obtaining the cellular telephone, is that telephone then made available or accessible in evidence for other law enforcement officers to access to? It was given. We had multiple detectives from majors there from the sheriff's office, and it was given to them.
You talked a bit about your training experience and different things that you've observed over your career as a law enforcement officer. As it relates to this specific interaction with the defendant, would you describe whether or not she was suffering a mental crisis, mental disease, or defect at that time? So to get in, I've been a deputy for 19 years. I've had a lot of interactions, arrested a lot of people. And in terms of surveillance and a lot of that, when people are surprised by law enforcement, we've heard the term fight or flight. So people have to make 2 decisions when police tell them to do something. Number 1, am I going to do it? And if their answer is yes, we're done. If their answer is no, the second decision they need to make is, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to run or am I going to fight? And so those decisions have to be made. And in this particular interaction, based on the totality of hiding in the vehicle, taking steps to be covert, those are
those are overt acts. Those aren't, subversive acts. And between that and then what we refer to as target glancing, which means when a person wants to run from us, or let's say they have a gun on them or whatever, a lot of times they'll actually look to see, they'll forecast where they're going to run, because they'll be looking around to try to find what their avenue of escape, and that's what they're going to do. Same thing if they have like a weapon on them, a lot of times they'll be touching it, or if they have a knife, we actually train that we see these things, and I've experienced those things through my 19-year career. So I saw the target glancing, and it was pretty evident when she was backing up and then started turning around that she was going to run. And I think that in my mind, those were conscious decisions that were made.
Okay. But specifically as it relates to observing a severe mental disease or defect while you were present on scene observing her, did you observe that?
I did not.
Ask the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Sergeant Ganstein. My name is Will Cook, and I represent Ms. Staunch. I'm going to ask you a few questions. This encounter with Ms. Staunch and Harley Hunt, her daughter, took place on January 30th, 2020.
That's correct.
Okay. Had you ever seen Ms. Staunch in person before seeing her at this residence where you, I guess, were staking it out or had it under surveillance?
I'd seen photos of her.
Photos? Okay. And is that how you recognized her when she came out of this house and got into the car with Harley?
Yes, when we do operations, we have briefing plans where we go over photos and all other stuff.
Okay. Had you seen photos of Harley?
I can't recall.
Okay. And you've testified that it seemed like she was acting suspiciously, ducking down in the back seat of the car, seemed like she was avoiding detection.
She wasn't in the vehicle consistent with the normal motoring public driving around, yes.
Okay. But she said it seemed like she was avoiding detection or specifically contacts with law enforcement.
That was my impression, yes.
Okay. So the person driving her around while she's doing this is also helping her to avoid detection or contact with law enforcement.
I can't speak to her intentions. I can only speak to my observations. My observations of her and her driving was not consistent with somebody that's actively trying to evade surveillance.
What would evading surveillance be?
When we follow individuals, drivers specifically, that feel that they're being followed by law enforcement, there's a number of countermeasures essentially that people will take. They'll make U-turns, run red lights, go down one-way streets, or go down to cul-de-sacs and turn around to see if anybody's following them, randomly pull over. It's in our training, our experience, it's pretty apparent when somebody's doing that, and I didn't see that here.
And that's what drivers will do to avoid contact or be followed.
Yeah, if there's multiple people in the vehicle, the only one that can make those decisions to do that would be the driver. They're the only ones that control the vehicle.
Was Letitia Staunch on January 30th, when you had your interaction with her, was she a person of interest or a suspect in the death of Gannon Staunch? Sorry.
I wouldn't. In my limited observation, because I wasn't part of the investigations division, it was relayed to me that there was concerns and she was potentially a person of interest. I never actually heard the term that she would be a quote suspect.
And when you were following them, did you know the driver of the vehicle at that time was Harley Hunt?
I had a high probability it was, based on the information I received last night and who was in the vehicle, and the vehicle was Harley's vehicle.
So you had gotten information that she was possibly staying at this residence with her daughter.
Yeah, we had a surveillance operation the day before, and I was monitoring that operation the entire night.
Okay. Did you have your body camera on? I see right here in the courtroom, you've got your body camera. It looks like the big black cell phone.
At that time, no, I was working in undercover capacity. capacity, and undercover officers don't carry body worn generally.
So you had no body worn camera at the time. Did any of the other deputies or law enforcement officers at the marshals?
Anybody that was on my team would not have had one. This was 3 years ago. Obviously, there's been legislative changes since then that have changed who has to carry them. It was not normal at that time for our investigations people to carry them either when doing contacts because they weren't specifically required like they are now.
Okay. Was Harley Hunt, since you knew her, she was at the residence, she was Miss Stauch's daughter, was she a person of interest in this investigation and to the missing, I guess at this time he was a missing person, but later death of Gannon Stauch?
Not to my knowledge.
And have you ever been qualified as an expert diagnosing any of the diseases, mental health diseases from the DSM-4 or 5?
I've not been qualified as an expert in that, no.
Okay. And you've never gone to school for or gotten any sort of degrees in psychology or psychiatry or anything? You've never been called as an expert witness to testify as to that?
I've never been called as an expert witness, no.
Okay. Just a second, Your Honor. Oh, I have. Thank you, Sergeant.
Redirect. Rakiyama?
Yes. Sergeant, as part of a unit conducting surveillance, why would it not be feasible to wear a body-worn camera?
Well, number one, we're in undercover capacity. We don't want other people to see. Basically, I don't want anyone to know my detectives and who they are, what they look like, or anything else. Certainly, body-worn camera evidence is discoverable, and that could potentially put my detectives' lives in danger that are working significant undercover operations involving criminal. We purposely hide our detectives' identity to the point to where they have different names and everything.
In terms of how obvious it would be to have a camera in the center of your chest, would that also be an issue as well?
Well, if we were wearing a camera, it would probably burn us, if you want to call it that. I think people would realize we were the police really quickly, and majority of our job is done behind the scenes, and people don't know that we're there. So,
no further questions, Your Honor.
do any of the jurors have any questions for Sergeant Gaston? All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. Thank you. Prosecuting current next witness, please.
Dr. Leon Kelly. Safe.
Dr. Kelly, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, sir. You swear affirm the testimony about giving this man will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you, Your Honor. Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step to the stand.
Good afternoon, Dr. Kelly. Good afternoon. Will you please introduce yourself to our jury and then spell your name for the record? I am Dr. Leon Kelly, Leonkelly. Dr. Kelly, what is your occupation? I am the El Paso County Coroner and Chief Medical Examiner. How long have you been in that type of a role? I've been with the Coroner's Office since 2008 as the Deputy Chief until 2018, which I was elected as the Coroner and Chief Medical Examiner, and then I was reelected in 2022. Can you tell the jury about your education that allows you to do that job? I have a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Indiana University. I have a medical degree from Indiana University School of Medicine. Following that, I completed 4 years in training in anatomic and clinical pathology at Penrose St. Francis here in Colorado Springs. And then following that, I completed a 1-year fellowship in forensic pathology at the University of Texas in Dallas. So I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology, and I'm a fully licensed physician in Colorado. Do you also have certifications? I do. Can you tell the jury about that, please? I'm board certified in anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology. Any professional memberships? Yes, I'm a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners, the College of American Pathologists, and the American Society of Clinical Pathology. What about publications? Have you published any journals or anything like that as it relates to pathology or any of your job duties?
Yeah, we published papers, posters as well on various types of deaths in forensic setting.
Have you ever testified as a qualified expert witness?
I have.
In what areas?
Forensic pathology, strangulation, many forensic sciences.
What courts have you testified as an expert in?
Multiple courts in Colorado, including El Paso County, as well as courts in South Dakota, California, Ohio, Texas.
Okay. At this time, I would move to have Dr. Kelly qualified as an expert in forensic pathology.
No objection.
Witness will be so qualified.
Just so we're all on the same page, Doctor, when we say the word pathology, what do we mean on that?
Pathology is a field of medicine defined essentially as the study of disease or injury.
And then what about forensic pathology?
Forensic pathology is a subset of pathology that deals specifically with deaths that occur in individuals suddenly, unexpectedly, or of anything non-natural. And so it's a field focused specifically on determining cause and manner of death in individuals who died under those suspicious or injurious circumstances.
Doctor, back in January of 2020, what was your role then as far as, I guess just what was your role back then?
January 2020, I was the elected coroner and chief medical examiner for El Paso County.
Did you get involved in the criminal investigation of the Gannon Staunch murder?
I did.
Can you tell the jury how that happened? How you got involved in that?
There were human remains discovered in Florida. There was a tentative identification as to who that individual was, but not a positive scientific identification. To date, when I became involved, they weren't yet able to definitively identify the individual as Gannon Staunch. And so I was contacted by our local district attorney's office and asked if I could help identify him. And so the medical examiner's office there in Florida had yet to be able to accomplish that. And I've had good luck and experience in identifying individuals who had been deceased for a long time. So I said, yes, let's bring the remains, or at least portion of the remains, to El Paso County, and we will do our best to identify him.
What were complicating factors leading to this difficult that you just described to get a DNA confirmation?
The remains had advanced decomposition, so the body had begun to break down. To make scientific identification, generally we talk about two things. Dental, which is you look at the teeth, you x-ray them, and then you have to have radiographs or x-rays from that individual that you think it is at a dentist that they went to when they were alive. The other way to identify individuals is through DNA. As the body breaks down, the cells that have the DNA, the material that we need to identify, begins to dissolve. And it becomes very difficult to use traditional DNA techniques to get enough of that material that's still intact to identify them. And so living in the mountains, in a place where people often go missing or not found for sometimes many years, we've grown skilled in being able to identify individuals who have that degree of decomposition or skeletonization.
What items did you receive from Florida to do the analysis that you did?
So for the forensic odontology examination, we received teeth, dental material, and then for the DNA, we received a femur, one of the leg bones, the upper portion of the leg bone.
Tell the jury what you did to potentially find a sample that would be suitable for developing a DNA profile.
So for the DNA, what we did was essentially take the femur, which is next to the large ball that lives up in the hip. It's a relatively protected area, and one of the last things that could be exposed to the environment. And that femoral head, the ball part that goes into the socket that's the hip, contains a large amount of bone and blood at its center, essentially bone marrow. And so we saw it in half, separating the two parts of the ball, and inside there is large amounts, I said, of
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, how you doing?
that replenishes the white blood cells in the body. And so we saw it in half, which revealed the inner marrow and a fresher state of cells, and then essentially released that to the DNA lab, who then could then scoop out that marrow
3.
and look for DNA.
And when you say you submit that to the DNA lab, is that the Metro Crime Lab? Did you ever learn whether they were able to develop a DNA profile from that sample you submitted?
I was told that
What
they
time
did.
is it?
Did you learn who they identified that DNA sample to?
The DNA was positively identified as Gannon staunch.
Okay.
Wow.
Thank you, doctor.
Cross-examination. Thank you. Dr. Kelly, good afternoon. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. When you do autopsies, you've done hundreds of them, if not thousands of them over your career, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you have a human body that is deceased, it will start smelling. For lack of a better term, it'll start emitting a bad smell, putrid smell, whatever you want to call it. But that's one of the hallmarks of death is a bad smell.
Yeah, as the body breaks down, the bacteria that live in our body begin to consume the body. One of the byproducts of their metabolism is gas that smells poorly. So once decomposition begins, yes, human remains, as do all organic remains, including other animals, begins to smell quite poorly.
How, and I know it depends on temperature, humidity, and a lot of other factors, but if you could just discuss when a person dies, a human being dies, how long does it take for this poor smell to begin?
So the breakdown of the body after death is driven almost entirely by temperature. Humans are like any other organism that dies. If you have a steak and you put it in your fridge or your freezer, it'll last for weeks, months, many years without smelling. You leave that same steak out on a hot day in the front of your house in the sun, and it'll start sinking within a couple hours. Humans are no different. And so given normal temperatures, let's say 70 degrees inside a home, usually decomposition begins between about 24 and 48 hours. Usually by about 3 to 5 days, the body is sort of well into a decomposition and the smell is quite obvious and strong. However, given a very hot environment, 90 degrees, 100 degrees, bodies can begin decomposing within just a few hours.
So inside a home or a building, 70 degrees, climate controlled, or perhaps in a vehicle that's climate controlled at 70 degrees, you're looking at 3 to 5 days before it could really start smelling poorly.
That's correct.
Okay. And when you say start smelling poorly, somebody else in a closed vehicle or in a home, or they would be able to smell it. It would be very apparent.
It would, yes.
Okay. Would it be overpowering?
We're probably talking to the wrong guy for that. It's kind of my everyday.
You have a high tolerance for poor smells?
Be careful what you get good at. Yes, I do. But yes, generally someone who's not used to dealing with that smell every day, it's tough. It's tough to deal with. It's essentially overpowering.
Okay. So a normal human being, it would be overpowering.
That's correct.
All right. I think that's all I have, Doctor. Thank you.
Right.
Doctor, your ability to withstand these odors notwithstanding, if a person freezes the body, will that delay when that smell becomes heavier?
It will. Yes, freezing a body will essentially stop decomposition as it does with all meat. And then once removed,
Free young boy.
sometimes several days
What?
for bodies that we have that
What are you
frozen out
talking
in the
about?
environment during the winter to thaw to the point where you can even autopsy them. Sometimes 2 to 3 days.
Is that a pervert
yeah, frozen
in
body
here?
or a body kept at cool temperatures essentially can last indefinitely before those smells appear.
And I'm going to ask you some probably very obvious questions here, but just bear with me. Gannon was reported missing in
What do you mean
late January 2020.
ETLX?
If the body had been left outside in those conditions, would that be right for freezing that body?
It would.
If you're a pervert,
If
you
it
need
was
to
left
get out.
overnight, would that be right for freezing that body?
It would.
And then if the the body is kept in an enclosed container, like a suitcase with blankets in it, would that also potentially limit how quickly that odor escapes from that item?
It would. First, it would insulate the body, allow it to stay cooler longer, and then also any closed environment helps prevent that smell from emanating out from flies getting to it, which aids in decomposition. So yeah, it would reduce the smell dramatically.
When your office responds out to crime scenes to retrieve a dead body from a crime scene, do you wrap them in, or do your folks wrap them in a body bag?
They do.
Is that to contain fluids and those sorts of things, and even potentially smell?
Evidence, fluid, smells, yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any of the jurors have any questions for Dr. Kelly? Looks like we have one. Just pass it forward. And Mr. Allen, if you would retrieve that council approach, please. All right, Dr. Kelly, what impact does humidity have on decomposition?
So humidity, meaning the moisture in the air, would result in decomposition likely and potentially happening at a slightly increased rate. Probably not dramatically, not enough to alter the time course that I talked about. What it does do is alter dramatically the type of decomposition that's going to happen. And so in a state like Florida and the Gulf Coast, where you have high temperatures, lots of moisture in the air and the environment, the body tends to decompose in a way that's sort of very, very, very wet. And it goes through a process which we call adipocere, which is the bacteria and the things that live in a moist environment are very different than a dry environment. And so those bodies do tend to smell even worse, if you can imagine, than other conditions. Here in the West, where we live, bodies go through a different state. They start out juicy and wet initially because there's fluid in the body, but then it relatively quickly turns towards a mummification, which is a drying out, a leathering of the body, which does tend to keep the smell down quite a bit. The first few weeks of the decomposition, there's not going to be a measurable difference. It's really after that point where they'll go these two different directions.
I will allow reasonable follow-up as to that question only, Mr. Allen.
Only for purposes of our record, can you spell adipocere for the court reporter?
Yes, adipocere is ADIPOCERE.
Right.
Got it.
All right. Mr. Cook.
I don't have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Anna.
Watch your step. Prosecution, call your next witness, please. Ms. Williams, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
Good afternoon, Ms. Williams. Sorry, Your Honor.
That's all right.
Would you state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Marissa Williams.
And where are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the Sheriff's Office?
For approximately 11 years.
And in 2020, what was the nature of your roles and responsibility with El Paso County Sheriff's Office?
I was assigned to the Investigations Division as a detective.
As it relates to your work, in this case, fair to say that you were the jack of all trades?
Yes, although primarily handled the financial responsibilities.
Okay. In terms of obtaining financial responsibilities, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes. I initially took interest in, I guess, tracking the financial records of the Stouches to determine what type of activity they had been taking part in during the time that Gannon went missing.
And so as part of that, would you have been involved in applications for search warrants, things like that?
That's correct.
Did you also have observations of other law enforcement officers collecting evidence, for example?
Yes, ma'am. There were other officers and investigators, both with the DA's office and the FBI, assisting the El Paso County Sheriff's Office in collecting the type of records I was collecting as well.
Okay. And I'll direct your attention to January 28th of 2020. Were you on duty that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you present for an interview, or at least a portion of an interview that occurred that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was that?
The interview was at the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. I observed Detective Mark Riley interviewing Eugene Al Staunch.
Okay. And for other interviews that may have been conducted with Letitia Stauk, were you present for any of those?
I was present, but I did not observe the full interviews.
Okay. I will direct your attention to observations of Letitia Stauk. Did you see her in person?
Yes, I did meet her in person.
Okay. And is there a particular date you recall seeing her in person?
Yes, it was Wednesday, January 29th at the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And on that date, can you generally describe her demeanor? How would you describe her demeanor?
She was evasive with questions. She was, I would say, upset, but not in the same way that you would expect with a parent that's missing a child.
I'll sustain the objection on the different grounds. I think she needs to lay a little bit more foundation as to her experience regarding contacts with parents of missing children.
And again, you agree that she could be basing it on an observation or opinion on her work experience of objection against students.
All right, and under People versus Frower, 373 Pacific 3rd, 672 Colorado Appellate 2015, I don't think that the Stewart standard regarding accident reconstructionist applies. This doesn't involve specialized training. This does involve her experience regarding contacts with other individuals who may have been similarly situated. The objections overruled.
In terms of your experience in law enforcement over the years, have you had contact with a variety of suspects, a person of interest, that sort of thing?
Yes, I have, probably hundreds.
Have you been exposed to parents of missing children as well?
Yes.
Parents of runaways?
Yes.
And in terms of your training experience, specifically as it relates to being around parents of missing children, how would you describe the defendant's demeanor on January 29th of 2020?
My experience with parents of missing children or runaways comes from having worked on patrol during the years of 2014 through 2018. And most parents are primarily concerned with doing something to track down their child, such as contacting friends, going out and searching for their child, or providing any type of evidence that would assist law enforcement in doing the same. But Ms. Staunch, on the other hand, was bothered by the fact that she had to come in and talk with law enforcement, and was more concerned about her well-being than her missing sons.
In terms of being present on scene, and again, based on your training experience as it relates to your role as a detective, but also as on patrol, did it appear to you at that time that she was experiencing a severe mental disease, defect, or crisis?
object to this testimony in general as to these officers that they lack the proper foundation with this. I'm going to simply refer the court to People v. Medina, Colorado Supreme Court 521 P2E 1257, Colorado Supreme Court 1974.
Ms. Gratiano.
For the reasons that we've had prior law enforcement officers explain their training experience and their observations while on patrol or other investigations, she's laid sufficient foundation to testify to that answer.
And Your Honor, Dean specifically deals with law enforcement officers that said that the limited interaction they've had is not sufficient for their opinion.
Right. Any further record? All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's what's going on. This officer cannot testify about whether or not someone has a mental disease or defect in the form or in the same fashion that a psychiatrist would be able to testify as to whether or not somebody has a mental disease or defect. However, I do think that this officer can testify based upon her context with a defendant as to how she interpreted the defendant's mental status. I think that's a common issue that we all deal with. Some people are, when we talk with somebody, we all understand that someone may be under some stress, someone may be acting differently, those sorts of things. I think that this officer can testify about that. However, this officer cannot testify about whether or not she has a specific mental defect or disease, and it will go to weight, not admissibility. Ms. Gratia.
In terms of understanding conversations that were occurring that day, how would you describe how the defendant answered questions?
I think she answered questions competently. She understood the questions that were being asked. There was no indication that she did not understand the questions or failed to understand language that was being spoken.
At any point, did she refer to herself or address anyone by a different name, referring to herself?
Not that I recall.
And in terms of her overall awareness of the situation, how would you describe that on January 29th of 2020? How would you describe her demeanor? Awareness as
how to answer.
Yeah. Awareness as to where she was, what was being done, what she was being asked, etc.
I think she fully understood the gravity of the situation because the El Paso County Sheriff's Office had asked her many times to come in for an interview and to assist in providing some evidence about the location of her stepson's whereabouts.
In terms of other documents that you assisted in retrieving from other law enforcement members, were you part of retrieving rental agreement from Avis Rental? Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Okay, and who did you assist in that process, if you did?
No, I was the one who collected the Avis budget rental records in March, on March 20th, I believe.
You're under permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibit 232.
You may, go ahead.
Familiarize yourself with People's Exhibit 232.
Do you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am. This is a different rental record than the one that I had referred to as collecting in March.
Okay. And when you talk about, you testified as to having contact with Avis, who in particular did you have contact with at Avis? Would have been a manager or somebody at the counter?
I don't recall the name of the person for this particular record. I recall for the other one, but not for this one.
Okay.
May I refer to my report?
You can. That would refresh your recollection.
Yes, ma'am.
And in terms of a specific name, I'm not asking you for a specific name, but just what representative from Avis you had contact with.
Sure.
And it may be helpful just to explain to the jury just the general process of retrieving, for example, a document from a business. How do you go about doing that? That just might be helpful to start.
So yes, the process for collecting evidence from rental car business such as Avis is that I issue a court order or a search warrant addressed to the company in the first place, and then have a judge review the probable cause in the affidavit. And once the judge has signed off on it, I serve it either in person or via some electronic delivery method that's preferred by the company. In this particular case, I did serve the warrant in person because the business was local. The Avis budget rental was at the Colorado Springs airport.
And to retrieve documents referring to a rental agreement, did you respond to that location?
I did.
And was a representative able to provide you with documentation?
Yes, ma'am. They provided the rental agreement that showed the signed agreement. It had been signed by Letitia Stouch, and I believe it was signed on Tuesday, January 28th, for a, it was for a white Kia Rio 4-door sedan. And that vehicle was used for approximately 1 day before it was returned to the same location.
And to be clear, when you're retrieving things, you're retrieving a rental agreement, but are you retrieving documents that come with that rental agreement from that company?
Yes, ma'am.
Such as Exhibit 232?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you explain how you recognize what 232 generally is?
I recognize it because I've seen it before during the time I collected it.
Okay. And because you've seen it before, would you say it's a fair and accurate representation of the rental agreement documents you retrieved from the Avis representative that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move for the admission of People's Exhibit 232.
Mr. Delaney, Exhibit 232 will be admitted. Go ahead.
In terms of other work in this case, you explained that you collected various financial documents. Did you also have an opportunity to review those financial documents?
Most of them I did, yes.
And overall, were you able to, along with other law enforcement members, able to track movements or charges, if you will, of the defendant through those financial documents?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination. Do any of the jurors have any questions for Detective Williams? No. Well, hold on.
Your Honor, I'm sorry.
Are we passing or not passing?
Your Honor, just pursuant to the stipulations that we've already put on the record,
Yes.
that have to deal with USAA records and American Express records. We've already asked for that stipulation to be put on the record.
And it has been, and I assume that this relates to some of that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Do any of the jurors have any questions for Detective Williams? All right. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
And Your Honor, for the purposes of the record, we are admitting People's Exhibit 231, which relates to that stipulation.
Okay. Are you doing that just as part of are you going to have a witness with that, or you're just admitting the exhibit?
We're just admitting the exhibit.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we're talking about here is that the parties have reached stipulations regarding various different exhibits. And one of the exhibits is Exhibit 231, right? Exhibit 231, which is referred to as a disc of American Express records. There won't be a witness with that. It will just be records that will be admitted as an exhibit for you to consider that has records from American Express. The parties have admitted or have agreed that the exhibit can be admitted without further evidentiary foundation or testimony. So Exhibit 231 is admitted. Prosecution, coming next witness. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the next witness, now's a good time to take a break since we came back a little bit early. So if I can have everyone back in the jury room at, say, 10 after 3, we should be able to start on time at that point. Again, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Don't discuss the case with anyone else. With that, all rise for the jury, please. You may all be seated. Record should reflect the jury has left the courtroom. Is there anything else we need to take up at this point? No. All right. Court will be in recess until 3:10. Thank you.
What you doing, babe? That's all. I wanna go somewhere. Let's go somewhere. Huh. Hey,
Hey. Your thing's off tonight.
is it? I didn't turn it off.
No, I mean, it's over.
Nuh-uh.
Just do.
No, it's not. They're taking a break.